How's it going, everybody? It's me, Hokyoku, and today we're going to be actually doing something that I didn't think I would be doing, but we are going to be doing it, and that is reacting to some Zejef videos. We're basically going to be reacting to his pre-release analysis for Emilie, one of the new Genshin Impact characters. Now, I have been out of the loop for Genshin Impact for quite a while, but I used to do very similar videos to Zejef. So we're basically going to be getting caught up to Genshin and watching this video, basically. So without further ado, let's get into my reaction to his Zejef. Bro, I remember him at like 30,000, but he's got like 100,000, something like that. Crazy.
To the Emilie pre-release analysis.
So Zejef did a lot of content similar to mine back in the day, or like he still does, but I used to do very similar to this.
No, Emilie is not like Neil. She doesn't actually change the way the reaction works. She's more like Femine, I guess, where the reaction just increases.
Femine.
But anyways, let's get right into it. Base HP of 13,000 health, which is honestly reasonable. Base attack.
Also, what is funny is that I've been out of the loop of Genshin so much, I don't know what a lot of these characters are either, so I'm going into this completely blind, but hopefully I pick up a few things that, and like learn how the character works basically from this video.
35, base defense 730, crit damage ascension. These are actually relatively good defensive stats, which are going to somewhat matter as we're going to see later. Normal attacks, forms up to 4 consecutive whatever.
Yeah, like really, base attack 335 is pretty dope. Like but it's like common at this point, or to have high.
We've got an essay here, so we're gonna have to. Instead of just reading the whole thing, I'll just tell you what it does. You press her skill and you get Dendro Oz. That's it.
Dendro Oz. I mean, that does sound pretty good.
Every 1.5 seconds, and then if you're playing her in a team that has burning, that Dendro hit becomes a double.
But the thing is, though, it looks like it has a limited range, and well, maybe you can like resummon at different places, but it looks like it has a limited range. Like when you spawned it, it had that little area. That might just be damage, but it might also be like the range that can actually target things. So
it deals a lot more damage, as you can see. This is the damage if you don't have burning. It deals 67.3% every time it hits. This is the damage if you do have burning. It deals 142.8%.
yeah, so burning increases it. That's pretty cool.
Times the damage. She is pretty much unplayable if you don't have a way to trigger burning. Her damage is just completely worthless. And as we're going to see later, damage is
yeah, which seems to be the main case with a lot of the newer characters that are coming out, is that like they're very niche and gimmicky kind of.
Every time there is a burning enemy around, her land, which starts at level 1, will gain 1 stack up to once every 2 seconds. Once it's collected 2 stacks, it will level up to the enhanced version that is significantly stronger. If she doesn't trigger burning for 8 seconds, she will lose her upgraded level and it'll go back to level 1. Now, one thing I'm not entirely sure of is...
yeah, but burning can be triggered pretty relatively easily.
The first way is we're going to have a 2-second timer on her skill. And every 2 seconds is going to check, is there a nearby enemy that is burning? If it finds one, you get a stack. If it doesn't find one, you don't get a stack, and the timer starts again. That's the first way they could do it. The second way they could do it is to have a constant thing that is checking if there's an enemy that's burning, and when it does find one, it goes on cooldown for 2 seconds. If they do the first way I described, it means that if you trigger burning at the wrong moment, it will not give her scent, which is the name of her stacks. Whereas if they do it the second way, it will work properly. I'm going to be assuming that's how it works for the rest of this pre-release, but I do want to...
yeah, so I guess what he's saying is that it's a thing whether or not, like, okay, it has a cooldown, and then it triggers again, I guess. Or, I guess, let's see. Or, it will trigger, but then it goes on a cooldown and can't trigger again for a while, I think. So then if you trigger burning, like, before that cooldown's up, like, let's see, okay, cooldown's up, you trigger burning here, but you don't trigger it here. So if you trigger it here, it won't refresh again once you get to here because you didn't trigger it after the cooldown is over. That's what I think he was saying.
Communicate that this is.
But I could be wrong
I'm not
because
entirely sure that's how it works.
these videos are a little bit fast-paced, and I'm not familiar already with the character.
Adding the fragrances collected within the case, Emilie converts them into pure dendro energy, creating a level 3 Emilie's case, which is her skill. Basically.
Skill, so you get level 3 skill.
Level 3 Emilie's case will not gather nearby scents, but it will continuously cause scented dew to descend, attacking opponents within range and dealing dendro damage.
So it's DOT burst.
Every 0.3 seconds, and one opponent can become the target every 0.7 seconds. When the duration ends, a level 1 Emilie's case will be recreated, but
so it's like decent DOT
on the field
for like 2.8 seconds.
Basically, her ult pauses her skill, becomes a stronger version of her skill for 2.8 seconds, and then redeploys the skill. From every
So, yeah. So that seems pretty good, because then it's like, okay, you can cast your E, you can cast your skill, that goes on a cooldown, basically, after you've already been off field. Then you cast your burst, you place down a skill, or like it places down the skill for you, I think, or something like that. Or you have to do it at the very end of your skill's duration to get it to stay up and then refresh. Who knows how that is, but we'll see. So you'd place your burst, which is then would replace the skill, and then like you would replace your skill again once that skill is done with cooldown, I guess. So
that means that you don't need to ever repress your skill cast, because the skill duration is 22 seconds and your ult cooldown is 13.5.
yeah, it's 13.5 seconds. So if you have enough ER, which is at 50, so
which can be somewhat useful because her skill has
so yeah, it's pretty much like constant E skill duration.
We're interacting with it with Numa helps in some way. Can be kind of useful, but it doesn't matter too much. When it comes to the way that it works for the damage, it's going to deal damage 10 times, but it can't deal
9
times to the same enemy. From what I understand, it is possible that it works with like pseudo-quadratic scaling, and that if you have a lot of enemies grouped together, you can effectively end
that
up
would be good if it
maybe
does,
all
because that's
together.
why Tartaglia is still pretty decent to
Otherwise, you're
use.
generally gonna get 3 hits, maybe 4, because there's some hits that hit in the area randomly, so it's possible that they hit the enemy, especially a bigger enemy, it's more likely that they get hit by more than 3. But her ult, as you can see, right, the scaling on it is actually pretty good, and the scaling on her skill is also pretty good. That means you have a character that just has a pretty good amount of damage. Now let's very quickly look at the passive.
Yeah, pretty good for like an off-field damage. And with burning, it's like you get more damage also, so more damage over time.
Which is a hit of AoE damage that deals 600% of her attack. And then rectification, she deals increased damage to burning opponents based on her attack, up to 36%. You're pretty much always getting at least 25 plus percent.
Yeah.
As an off-fielder with basically no attack buffs. And then finally, her exploration passive, which is actually very relevant. When her skill is on field, all party members gain 85% resistance against burning damage, which matters a lot because otherwise you're gonna die.
And if that was before they changed burning, or like the grass burning back, if you remember back in the original Genshin days before they patched it, you could die to grass really, really fast based on your elemental mastery and everything. It was pretty crazy.
You're looking at
plus it just do way too much damage.
Over 300 if you're crowning her. Every 1.5 seconds. That's actually pretty good. Reactions aside, it's actually better than Fischl, which is, you know, a pretty good amount of damage.
Better than Fischl plus better base tag. So pretty good. But I think she is a 5-star, so that would make sense.
Every other proc of it, which means that you get your double hit, it applies Dendro, and then the next double hit does not apply Dendro. Technically, it's timer based, which means that if the enemy's really close on the first hit and really far for the second one, maybe it can be possible that both of them apply, but look, in most situations, it's only going to be one. But yeah, effectively what her role in teams is going to be is not elemental application. Her Dendro application is...
Yeah, it didn't seem like that. It seems like she's mostly like a buff support for burning and like sub DPS basically for burning team comps. But you'd probably want, I would say, going before this, I'm gonna predict what he's gonna say like once we get to well, there's team comps I think at the end, or like there's different team comps, but yeah, I would say that like you'd probably want like extra application, like a Nahida or something like that, because Nahida in this will should be able. Well, she doesn't have application necessarily, so you might want to go with like Baiju. Yao Yao is also really good for off-field application, I guess you could say. Let's see. Dendro Traveler is a no-go because his flower just explodes instead of doing DOT. But yeah, I don't really know of any other ones. Although, like, if you're triggering burning with her, the application rate isn't too much of an issue. So, like, you'd probably just want somebody with high pyro application, just so, like, there's not being, like, Dendro 2 applied to them, and then the pyro character is triggering that, because you'd want pyro DPS characters like Arlecchino, what's his name, the magician guy, Yoimiya, all sorts of other pyro DPSs like Hu Tao. You'd probably want those going with the main damage driver, I guess you could say, because you're going to be lacking damage if you're only going with burn reactions the whole time. And then I would also actually say that a vaporize burst support would actually be very good for a team like this as well, because yes, you can also create Dendro cores. So like if you're going for like burn as your main like DOT type stuff from her as a sub DPS, I would go pyro DPS as your main on-fielder. You go pyro as your on-fielder, her as your sub support, and then you would go with a burst reaction support or like burst damage dealer, because they'll always have pyro applied to them, so you can still vape. So you could go with that or something like that, depending on the situation you're in as well. Like, yeah, you could basically just go for like quick bursts of like big vape numbers, basically, to basically kill stuff if you're not having time to DOT stuff, I would say. So that would be pretty good. But then it's like, yeah, for your extra slot, I would probably go with like some extra Dendro application, or like a pyro healer or something like that. Like I would, like Bennett would still be really good in teams like this as always, but
that it's not really that useful as a way to use burning to enable other reactions, which is something that
use burning to enable other reactions. Yeah, yeah, because like burning was really good for like basically keeping pyro on stuff to like vaporize, but mostly for like the melt reaction with using a cryo DPS, because the cryo, if you're using a cryo DPS, it melts, but it doesn't remove it because it's not because there's already fire on them, so like it basically only removes part of it and then it reapplies it. I think like Hydra might actually remove the pyro if I'm not mistaken, so like it won't just keep triggering after that, so you'd have to reapply pyro, but it might still keep the Dendro on there, if not actually also creating a Dendro core. But then it's like you'd have to basically reapply the burning, which might be okay considering that she might have downtime, or she might need a little bit of time where you're not necessarily burning, or like you would want like different points or intervals where you're triggering burning rather than you just triggering burning it going on for a long time. Maybe triggering it and then it stopping, triggering it and stopping is way better, is what I'm thinking. I guess I'm getting back in. Oh yeah, yeah. These type team comps. They probably aren't too great.
Really trying to get a good mental image of how the burning aura works, you can think of it as it's just a campfire, and the Dendro application is,
yeah, campfire. If you put water on it, it'll put it out mostly, but
can keep the fire going even if you don't add more heat, right? Even if you don't start the fire again with more pyro. But Emilie's Dendro application is weak enough that she's not putting enough wood to keep the fire going through other reactions. What that means is that if you want to play her in those reaction teams, you're going to need to play her with an off-field pyro unit. You're not going to be able to
off-field pyro unit. That would make sense because
in the same way that you can with
then you just have constant pyro
However,
application, but then
in
you would also
exchange
be
for
able to
that,
swap
she was a
to
lot more
maybe
fast.
you could do like a
All
Dendro
the
driver
nearby
like
teams get
Alhaitham
her
is
elemental
another
application,
idea.
and in quicken teams, her personal damage is pretty good because of that elemental
It
application
really
and the
depends
fact that she's
on
building
what
a lot of
combo
gear.
you want
Burning
to go.
teams in pretty much any team where Nahida doesn't end up triggering quicken, her actual personal damage output isn't that much, right? She has great AoE, she has great coverage, she has great application, but her damage is, you know, a bit on the lower side.
Constellations.
Is actually pretty good. So the sort of teams where you're gonna want to play her is teams where you're less reliant on the
Weapons.
Dendro application.
Oh yeah, she is a
more
pole
reliant
arm.
on the damage. One of the teams I wanna look into when she gets released, and I wanna talk about it now before we get into the teams because I'm really not sure how good it's actually gonna end up being, is with Neuvillette. I am not sure that
Neuvillette
have good enough burning up time to get her level 2 passive reliably. And part of that is because I don't know exactly how.
Yeah, because like with Neuvillette, it's like, yeah, he has his big hydro cannon thing, and he's got his like area of effect kind of thing. So going a sub DPS route, you'd want like a pyro sub DPS, her as that, and then you'd probably also want like an extra pyro application, I would say. Like you'd probably want a good amount of pyro application. So like characters like Toma wouldn't really work very well. Just because he'd probably be too slow, he wouldn't be able to keep up. Same thing with like Dia. Dia wouldn't be able to keep up really. So what are the fastest pyro applicators? I don't really know. I really don't know.
That being said, she has a bunch of other teams where she's going to be viable, and so we'll be talking about all of those. But first, let's now talk about the constellations very quickly. So, Constellation 1 increases the damage dealt by Fragrance Extraction, which is her elemental skill, and her passive talent, Clear Du Cologne, so the second one, by 20%. The latter requires unlocking set to passive talent first. Additionally, when nearby party members trigger burning reaction or deal dendro damage, it will generate an additional scent. The event can be triggered.
An additional scent, but then you're capped at 3 still, right?
On skill and passive, but much more importantly, it means the passive triggers more often, right? Because you get more sense, and the passive triggers based on sense.
Based on sense. So like you need.
It can in some teams actually be enough to get the sort of application necessary for your reactions to work better. And
so I guess it's triggering when you get up to 3 cents or something.
Sorry, it deals a good amount of damage.
Or it can trigger them.
I think like within the realm of Constellation 1s, it's okay. Obviously keep in mind she's generally going to be played as an off-fielder, and so a Constellation on her doesn't do as much as a Constellation on a hyper carry, even if it were to increase by the same amount of damage. Constellation 2, like top note, the Fragrance Extraction, Aromatic Explication, or Clear Du Cologne, which is when her skill, burst, or Ascension passive hits opponents, decrease their res by 30%. This is pretty good. She's not really gonna be played in teams where you deal other
Yeah.
So
like 30% decrease isn't like too crazy.
But it does mean that if you're playing.
But yeah, he's probably about to say like if you're playing her with a Dendro hyper carry, this might actually be okay.
The Reverie set, you're increasing your damage by a pretty decent amount.
A Reverie set. I'm not familiar with the newer sets either, so. But I was saying that like yeah, if you're running a Dendro hyper carry, like Dendro damage, Dendro resistance decrease just from like your off-fielder support is actually pretty good. But it's really a matter of like, okay, who are you slotting into your teams more so? Because if you're playing a hyper carry to their max potential, you're probably using their best supports. So, like for example, like if I was using a Tartaglia team, I would probably run like Yunjin, Kazuha, and like Bennett as my team basically, and that's usually what I did run before. So this is one of those weird things where it's like, yeah, okay, you could maybe swap out that in that team example, or like let's just say instead of I would be Yoimiya, Yunjin, Emilie, and what's his name, Bennett. If that's your team, it could be pretty good, but also like, okay, you'd have to factor in how much damage you're getting from her as a sub DPS, and also how much damage you're getting off of like a Kazuha being there as a sub DPS also. Because he does some pretty okay sub DPS and swirl damage as well. And he also boosts your main hyper carry, and that scales up. So that scales your damage up a good bit, or like gives you a good amount of damage extra. So really it's like, but with like diminishing returns type stuff, like yeah, you get diminishing returns in terms of your investment. Like if you invest too much in one area, you'll lack in another. But if you're basically running a team or like running stuff to where it's like, okay, you've got Yunjin there for the damage, boosting on normal attacks. Yoimiya also has like stuff that boosts her normal attacks as well, or like her pyro damage percent as well. So you probably don't necessarily need Kazuha. You could swap that out with like Yelan or something like that. That could also work. But then it's like, yeah, okay, then you're getting to where you're comparing a Vaporize team comp to a Burning team comp versus a Swirl team comp. So there's 3 team comps there, and they all might yield different results. So it really depends on what situation you're in, and also like, yeah. So you can get good damage from her as a sub DPS, but.
Duration is increased by 2 seconds. Interval between opponents being selected as a target is decreased by 0.3 seconds. So what that means is that instead of 9 hits in total, you get 16, and instead of only being able to target the same enemy every 3 hits, it's now able to target the same enemy every 2 hits. Which means that in single target, you're going from 3 guaranteed hits to 8, which is obviously a pretty big increase. It's overall pretty good. C5 also its burst talent level, which once you have C4, burst is a more significant portion of her damage, so it's also pretty
yeah,
good.
the burst is pretty good.
A Dendro Infusion every 12 seconds she can trigger it, which is more or less every time you get her ult. So because her ultimate is 13.5 second cooldown, but the cooldown.
So that basically gives you like her extra Dendro application.
Every time you ult, and you get effectively 1200 motion value on her normal attacks on top of their base. Get a Dendro Infusion on them, and you get to generate more scent. And again, right, every time you get 2 cents, you trigger her Ascension passive, which means that 4 cents is an additional 2 hits of her Ascension passive, which is 1200 motion value. In other words, you get 4 attacks with 300 motion value each, plus 1200. It's kind of 600 motion value on each of those 4 attacks. It's a good way to front load a good amount of damage. I think that.
Not gonna lie, I don't really remember what motion values are, but
overall, her constellations are.
I think they're like how many seconds you're on the field almost.
Her early constellations are individually relatively strong, but none of them is like a very particular damage increase compared to other cons. Overall, pretty good cons across the board. First things first, for her weapons, we gotta talk about her signature.
Yeah, weapons. And he's blurring it, which is what I used to do, but he's showing more of it than before. He's showing, well, I'd say I would show about how much he does, but he's blurring the image. But I would blur it entirely, yet I still got striked. It's like, I could be so mad if I wanted to. I could be like where Zejef is almost at this point. Potentially, if I would have kept increasing like my video quality and I don't know, like tried to pivot more towards Zejef style videos.
You'll get a total of in a 20-ish second rotation, about 7 particles. She's probably catching maybe 1 of them. Then, I mean, let's take a look at a very
not caught. Yeah, you're probably only catching 1 particle, if any, if none.
She generated about 30, and her cost is 50, which means her ER requirements 172. That's kind of high. And because her ER requirements are so high, what exactly does that mean? What can we do with this information? Well, let's take a look at what happens if instead you ult every other rotation.
Yeah, every other rotation. So yeah, it's not too bad necessarily. Which also means that you can cast your skill, I guess you could say. Probably, like you would cast it once, but then it's like if you're running that high ER, you wouldn't have to cast your skill really again because it has uptime and then the burst refreshes it. But I guess if you want to go the other route is where you can use your skill and then burst, and then you use your skill again at the end of that to carry you into your next burst in the next rotation, or you start that at the very end of your skill or at the very end of your rotation the second time.
Weapon or some form of ER.
I don't know if that made any sense.
Looking at the non-ER weapons, going ER sands versus attack sands with burst every other rotation is actually like within 1% incredibly similar damage. What that means is that But that also
No.
means that if you have a weapon that gives a lot of ER, it's not completely wasted, right? She's a character that has a burst that is weak enough that it's not necessary to use, but still strong enough that if you can use it every rotation, you want to. And
Yeah,
so
you'd benefit
we're
in
gonna
long
get into weapon
encounters
options.
like
We're gonna see
Abyss.
that a lot of those ER weapons are
But
actually
overworld, it's like,
relatively
yeah, you don't necessarily
on
need
top
it.
of that, her damage outside of her ult, I want you to take a look at this. Size, radius 1. That is the same AoE as a Hyper Bloom product. Yeah, her AoE is not very good on her skill.
Ooh.
She does have the Ascension passive, but this will proc at most 3 times in a rotation. Most of the time it's going to be 2 to 3. So that's not that much, which means that in AoE, her ult matters a lot more. And what that means is, although the calcs are relatively similar for ult every rotation versus ult every other rotation,
If you're
I'm
fighting
still
tons of
gonna
enemies, then
slightly
yeah.
favor ult every rotation. In a very similar way that I would favor an ult every rotation build on Yaimiko when you're playing her in aggravate teams, where your main form of AoE is her ult and Kazuha. Yeah, so now that we have her ER requirements out of the way, let's talk about her weapons, and let's start with her signature. So, it's a crit rate weapon, medium base attack, 33 crit rate, attack percent increased by 15%. When the equipping character triggers burning on an opponent or deals zero damage, the damage is increased by 18%, up to 2 stacks. So that's 36 damage percent and 15% attack. When 2 stacks are reached, or
That's pretty basic for like a 5-star weapon, really.
up to once every 12 seconds.
And then you get
If you have a
energy,
slightly
so
extended rotation,
Yeah.
or realistically, right, because you block this on the first time you reach 2 stacks, and then it keeps going, and you get your first proc at like 5-ish seconds of your rotation, then at 17, then at 29, then at 41. So if the chamber's not taking too long, you're pretty reliably getting 2 procs per rotation. And as it turns out, reducing your burst cost from 50 to 26 makes your ER requirements entirely trivial. This is one of the most egregious cases of R1 bait in the game. I really
Yeah,
don't like
26.
It feels like they, gave her a problem and are selling the solution. The gap between this weapon and the next best weapon is bigger than the gap between most characters' signature and best free-to-play option, which makes me angry. There is a silver lining though.
I'm making
which
big
is
gaps.
that there are
It's
actually
huge
some
gaps.
teams where it is very much worth considering playing Emilie either with a second Dendro unit or as an
Second
alternate,
Dendro.
or at the very least in some form of quick swap team. And if that's what you're doing, then she ends up generating more energy, and so her ER requirements become a lot lower, which obviously is going to mean that.
But with 50 ER, it's like I really don't care as much. It's like if I have ER from my artifacts and stuff, if you're running 2 Dendro characters almost, it's like you're getting more Dendro particles than you would, so you can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit, I would say. But like 170 is what you would need for every rotation comfortably. But also you could probably get away with slightly lower if you are running her with other Dendro characters, is what I would say. But he might say something like that, but I might just be giving you guys this information because I haven't played in so long. Jade Wing, I think, yeah, I don't think it works off field.
Because it has really high base attack and it's a great base.
Or I don't remember if it works on field or off field.
Fine. If you're playing her as an off fielder, she's not getting Bennett buff, she's not getting these sorts of buffs that generally can make deathmatch better than Jade Wing Spear for off fielders. So it's still like a pretty decent option, but it's not all that insane. Calamity Queller is actually relatively similar to Homa. It's a pretty decent 5-star
Yeah,
stat stick.
good stat stick, especially if you're running good amount of attack stuff. Yeah.
Synergy with Bennett is not really there, which obviously means that attack percent becomes a much more valuable stat.
Yeah, you get a lot from Calamity Queller.
Scarlet Sands, still a decent stat stake.
And Elemental Mastery would also be very good on here, I would say.
Is okay. Skyward Spine and Jade Wing Spear are relatively similar to one another when it comes to off-field Emilie. Obviously, this is assuming you can take advantage of the ER, which may not be the case. If you're not taking advantage of it, obviously it's not that good. Deathmatch is her best in slot 4-star. Low refined Deathmatch is similar to the OK 5-star stat statistics, high refined deathmatch is similar to the decent 5-star statistics. Blacklift Pole is. I've never been a huge fan of Blacklift Pole.
You're not necessarily okay. So like also, you're not necessarily defeating the enemy with burn. In most cases, I would say. You're probably going to be defeating the enemy with your Pyro Hypercarry or your Dendro Hypercarry or your whatever character you're using, pretty much. That's what's likely going to give you the finishing blow. And I don't necessarily know also if Pyro Burn actually counts as the final hit for the character necessarily. It might not even count as a final hit, but I'm not familiar with the mechanics enough, but I would definitely say that maybe the one who triggered it is the one who, if they burn to death, then yeah, it would count as like a final hit for that character, potentially. So that could potentially work if you are basically relying on the DOT to finish off enemies, or to finish off like smaller enemies around while you focus on a larger enemy that you're attacking. Could potentially be where this could work.
Aren't like necessarily the main source of your team's damage. Blacklift Bolt only gets a stack if the last hit was dealt by the character who is using the Blacklift weapon, which means very often, even if you do kill enemies, you don't actually get the Blacklift stack. So
I don't think burn actually triggers it.
Okay stat stick. At 1 stack, it's a little bit better than the other 5-star or the other 4-star free-to-play options, but at 0 stacks, it's worse. And the other free-to-play options are just a lot easier to make worse.
Yeah.
I would really recommend it. Missing Wind Spear is her default free-to-play. Generally going to be her best free-to-play 4-star option, but the gap between it and the other options,
because you get that 96 EM is pretty good.
Because those other options do give you that ER that can let you burst every rotation. And so, while it's like the default free-to-play option, I don't actually think it's all that great. I think you should very much be willing to consider one of these other 2 options. And more importantly, if you didn't get Miss at Wind Spear because you weren't playing while the event was happening, you're not missing it. So Favonius Lance, I would consider to be generally her actual best in slot 4-star. Deathmatch is going to be her best in slot for damage, but Favonius Lance is actually not that far behind because their requirements can actually be high enough for the 5 to matter. Now, because 5 gives you
that's 30%, so it's pretty good.
Low substat weapon for the Lance, you actually end up in a situation where those 3 additional clear particles reduce your ER requirements.
Yeah, so literally it's like within like just having like 1 ER substat off roll or something, or like just ER as your substat that doesn't even get rolled into. You could have like maybe like 2 artifacts that have like just ER passively on them, and then you just have ones that have like attack or like elemental mastery and stuff as well. And then with Fav Lance you can just get over that 140 barrier almost pretty easily. If you're staying on field enough to actually trigger the passive enough.
So from 170-ish, which is ER Sands plus up to 4 ER substats, swapping to 5 Lens means you can swap your ER Sands to an attack Sands, and you can get more non-ER substat rolls, which actually makes it a much stronger option than you'd expect out of a weapon that doesn't actually give you any damage under the substat or the passive. And then on top of that, obviously, these additional particles help a lot for the rest of your team's ER requirements, which is the main thing that pushes it over the other options in my opinion. I will say though, there are quite a few immediate teams where the rest of the team doesn't care as much about the energy, and in those teams, then I would go Deathmatch over Favonius Lance on her, but it's really not that large.
Yeah, so basically if you're running like a bunch of Dendro characters in your team,
you adjust your build for it properly, it's very similar to Miss
like a Dendro Hypercarry maybe.
And then finally, the catch is decent free-to-play option.
Burst damage by 32%. Her burst does do quite a good bit of damage as well, so.
The catch is also very similar to Miss at Wind Spear, so if you don't have Miss at Wind Spear, don't have a 5 Lance that you can spare for her, putting her on the catch is a completely fine way to go about it. So, let's order these. Honestly, realistically, what you're going to see is her best in slot, then all the decent stat sticks, Oma, Calamity Queller, South Scarlet Sands, Engulfing, then Deathmatch, then Jade-Wing Spirit, and Skyward Spine. I'm putting Deathmatch above here because I know a lot of people have reclines on it. If your Deathmatch is R1, it's maybe a tiny little bit below these. If it's R5, it's above. Overall, it's not really that big of a difference. And And realistically, I think there's enough teams where Fav matters that I would put Fav above Deathmatch here below these decent stat sticks. Next up, we'd have...
He's literally making a tier list right now.
Again, right, keep in mind when you're using pretty much any of these weapons, right, you can go for a burst every rotation or a burst every other rotation build, and both are completely fine. Obviously, when you're going one of the ER weapons, if you're not bursting every rotation, you're kind of running it down because your ER weapons aren't giving you anything now. I also want you guys to remember that this ranking can change a lot in some of her teams. I know a lot of people
okay,
see her
so
like,
let's see.
she's a burning character, so
oh, EM works for burning, yeah.
right? No, not at all. Let's explain how burning damage works. So this is going to be pretty easy to see because my Nahida has a lot more ER than my Yanfei, and my Yanfei is level 80. But when the burning is doing more damage, it's because Nahida's triggering it. When it's doing less damage, it's because Yanfei's triggering it.
So you want your Dendro character to trigger it, kind of.
Auto on Nahida. Right, the burning is doing
1,300.
However, if I auto on Nahida and then auto on Yanfei, the damage goes down to 500.
Yeah, so you're losing out like 2/3 of your damage.
The elemental mastery of the last character to have applied either Pyro or Dendro to the burning enemy. When it comes to Nahida, that means that she's very, very often going to be the trigger because the requirement for her skill to deal damage is that you've triggered a reaction, which means that whenever you trigger the burning reaction with your Pyro character, it'll proc Nahida's skill, and Nahida's going to deal damage right after them, effectively preventing them from having any burning ownership, right? So if I use my E, and I trigger burning,
yeah, and then, yeah.
you can see it's the amount of damage that...
It basically re-triggers it.
Because Nahida's applying the damage.
So that's pretty cool.
Right after, then she can have in burning...
Let's see, artifacts. I'm gonna skip to artifacts.
So, that...
Oh gosh, I'm still loading. Ah! I'm still loading! I'm still loading! My computer's being a bit slow. Forgive me. Sorry, sorry. My computer's a bit slow. Ah! It's being very slow. Darn. Why are you being so slow?
Eliminates most of the reaction focus sets, right? Gilded Dreams, 2-piece with EM stuff. No, that's not what you want to use. So what do you want to use? Well, yeah,
no 2-piece EM, okay.
We can talk about Unfinished Reverie. It's a Dendro character. So
but that set's unfinished! You can't use it!
Damage is skill damage, so we can talk about Golden Troop. Then I guess 2-piece also.
Golden Troop with...
Golden Troop is not very good. She does have a decent amount of skill damage, but what you're going to notice is it gives you 70% skill damage. The Burning set gives you 50% damage percent on everything.
Yeah, on everything.
Which is almost as much damage for your skill as Golden Troop, because she's relatively saturated on damage percent and not that saturated on attack percent. But then on top of that, it's also buffing your Ascension passive, which they explicitly state is not skill damage. So this isn't buffed by Golden Troop.
Yeah,
it is
not
buffed
buffed.
by Reverie, and it buffs her ult damage, which is also pretty significant, especially in AoE. So Golden Troop is a fine option if you have a really good Golden Troop and you don't want to have to farm for one of the other sets if you don't have one. But it's really not gonna be what you're aiming for. But really what you're gonna want to be going is either 4-piece Reverie or 4-piece Deep. This 50% damage percent and 18% attack, that's a lot of damage. However, so is 30% Dendro Res Shred and 15%.
Yeah, Res Shred is very good.
Overall,
If you don't have like her Constellation 2, or you're not going for that, like Deepwood is very valuable. But if you also already have like a character that has Deepwood, like if you're running her with Nahida on Deepwood, then you could go with her with the Burning set also on there, and then that would be more synergy. And then yeah, when you're swapping around teams comps without Nahida and that kind of stuff, you could swap over and stuff. But yeah.
With another character that isn't reliant on a very specific set, you can put that other character on Deepwood, and you can put her on Unfinished Reverie, therefore benefiting from the Res Shred from Deepwood and all of the damage bonus.
Just what I was saying.
Which is the best of both worlds. It is worth noting that that's not going to be possible in every team, and there's a lot of characters that, while they can be deep wood holders, like Zhongli, for example, aren't that good at it. So generally, if you don't have either of the sets farmed, I would lean a little bit more
Zhongli Deep Woods.
However, if you
Because it's triggering reactions or something, but
have deep wood farmed, deep wood is useful in so many characters, and
yeah.
so is Gilded Dreams, that it's a pretty resin efficient domain to farm. I know a lot of people already have a pretty good deep wood set, and so considering how close it is, I'd say
I mean, I have a decent deep wood set. I don't have like anything crazy. Most of my good sets are from like Shimenawa and the EM set or ER set.
Next up, artifact stats. So you're obviously gonna go attack.
Attack percent, yeah, Dendro crit. Pretty simple. Teams, mono burning. Let's get to this.
We get into the teams. So, what sort of teams are you looking for? Generally, just any team where you can fit her that would benefit from her damage, but isn't reliant on her application. Something
Yeah, not relying on application, but utilizes the application. So that means that like you're still letting her trigger some burning reactions. So like her with Nahida would still be okay because it's like Nahida's triggering that. And then you're also hitting it with Dendro after that, after Nahida already triggered it and stuff. So really, it's like you'd have similar, comparable damage. But also, if you hit it with, if you're using a Pyro Hypercarry, you hit her with, you hit them with the fire damage, and then Nahida triggers that. Then they're starting to burn, but then Emilie basically goes back and hits again after that, triggering burning again, so then it makes another trigger. So you're triggering burning a lot, but then it's also like making sure that, okay, so if Nahida doesn't trigger, then for some reason, or like just too much duration, it's like you always have like burning, I guess. Or if you trigger like, or if you're running like Hydro and then you're making like other reactions with those cores or something.
While she doesn't apply Pyro really herself, her role in teams is very often very similar to that of a Pyro unit, and she does not really do the job of a Dendro unit all that well. So,
yeah,
a good example of a team where, you know,
a very good example.
In Monopyro, and I'm calling it Monopyro, but I guess
Monopyro.
So any sort of team where you're using, you know, Bennett and Emilie with then either Pyro on-fielders like Arlecchino, Klee, Yanfei, whatever you want, or off-fielders like Shenling, and then the last slot that's either another Pyro unit or
Triple Pyro, Kazuha.
The last slot that's a Dendro unit, like Nahida, that helps her get her deep wood off. She's got a lot of flexibility in those mono burning slots. I do think that the best
yeah, very good.
would be the ones that use a strong Pyro on-fielder and an Animo unit. But if you're using her,
he's about to get into Farina on here also. I still don't have Farina either.
Other than mono burning, we have
I might pick up a Farina.
So very similar to a mono burning team, but instead of that Animo slot, you just slot in Farina. You're not trying to get Farina to apply Hydro for your Pyro units to vape. You're just bashing your head against the wall with your Pyro units and getting some nice Farina vapes out of it. You can play her in Melt. You can play something like Grizzly, Bennett, Emilie, Shenling.
Grizzly Melt.
You might be able to play her as another element in Nebulette teams that already slot in Shenling or another Pyro. But again, I'm really not sure if she's going to be able to properly get her level 2 skill off. We talked quickly about Air Fryer. Air Fryer is kind of a meme team that
Air Fryer, yeah.
Release to try to, you know, find.
I mean, hey, I've noticed that as I get more of the Archons, I tend to keep like 2 or 3 Archons in my teams. Whenever there's like a new DPS or something. So like I was with Arlecchino, I was using Arlecchino. I was using like that, Yelan, Zhongli, and Bennett was my team comp. But like I would actually use Nahida at the end. I would use Nahida as my healer because I can use Nahida as my healer with her that one catalyst that basically heals when you cast her burst. So that's what I do with my Nahida most of the time. Just because it's like so fun to have Nahida as your like 4th slot, so
using your Dendro unit in a quick swap.
Nahida heal is very good.
Units end up swirling a lot of Pyro and getting a lot of burning ownership, and if you're keeping enemies grouped, because burning does actually have some AoE, and it
Air fryer, yeah.
Character affected by.
So yeah, like air fryer, it's like, yeah, you're grouping up enemies, and then you're basically triggering burning on all the enemies because you're triggering burning on everybody in there, I guess is the idea. Burn load, so that's overload burning, which seems like it would be pretty interesting as well.
Other than that,
As long as, does overload actually remove the burning buff is the thing, but I don't think it would.
That is maybe not popular, but definitely a consideration for side-out players. And when you play a team like this, don't take a look at the builds. Okay, the builds are not what you're supposed to do. I just want to show how the elemental interactions work.
So you do that,
So
and yeah.
you can start hitting on them, and as you can see, thanks to the magic,
You're getting
thing,
quicken
we're
and
still getting
burning and stuff.
aggravates and consistent aggravates on our electro application, even though we're triggering burning, right? We're effectively, instead of using our default wood as the fuel for the burning reaction, we're using special wood. We're using our
Special wood. Zappy wood.
and
Lightning wood.
a bit of an issue with Emilie. Her dendro application.
So yeah, lightning wood seems like it'd be pretty fun. Burning load with dendro carries. Yeah, so basically I would say that you just want to have burning load with dendro carries. So yeah, like so you have her as your off-field dendro application, but then you have your dendro carry doing dendro DPS and also triggering like quicken and that kind of stuff, and but I think burning actually removes quicken aura as well, but then you're still getting overload damage. So it's really a matter of, do I want to run her? Well, you wouldn't run her in a quicken team, but anyway.
Electro reactions with your on-fielder to apply that electro.
Burgeon is one thing I would say that like you need timing with Burgeon is what I would say.
Plus another dendro unit.
So it's like 3 things here.
Solo dendro for Burgeon, you're gonna get basically no Burgeons. But if you have 2 dendro units in your Burgeon team, that means you have 1 pyro unit and 1 hydro unit, which means you don't have either.
So I would say you would want, in this situation, you would want like a dendro carry, a hydro sub DPS, well, not hydro sub DPS, you'd probably want like a hydro semi-regular applier. So one that creates Burgeon cores, but not so often that it interrupts burning too much. And then you'd want like a good pyro sub DPS maybe. That might be correct, that might already be wrong.
Or a second hydro unit to actually ensure that you do get a decent amount of Burgeons. So pretty much the only way I can see her working out in a Burgeon team is if you use a unit that has really high hydro app, like
Singshou. That was actually what I was not thinking completely, but yeah, so I guess like so I guess the idea here is going for Burgeon damage rather than burning damage, but you have burning damage there as your fallback whenever you're not having Burgeon application and burgeoning. So yeah, let's see. Let's listen to his closing thoughts on the team comps. Yeah, like it's really counterintuitive.
Out of these teams, I'd say that the main ones I would recommend are the Mono Burning and the Farina Vape teams, and then maybe the Nebula team if you end up being able to properly get your level 2 ramp.
My vent was closed.
Gonna be very strong, and this is the sort of team where you can decide to use her as an on-fielder. Using her with Farina as an on-fielder is going to be pretty
very good with C6 is probably her best team.
That much on-field presence other than being able to benefit from Bennett's buff on her damage. You can swap out of her to make sure that you're building up fanfare on all of your characters without losing too much. Sherling and Farina are going to help with the 8 damage and AoE. I think it's definitely going to be one of the better ones. So, Mono Burning, Pog, Farina Vape, Pog, Nebula, either Pog or Dog, not sure. Grizzly is going to be decent. Air Fryer is going to be... And then Burning Load is going to be between and decent, depending on how well the auras work. And again...
Yeah, so I guess I'm probably going to end the video here. I know this was a little bit of a long reaction to his video, but... Yeah, closing thoughts? Let's see, I'll bet a closing thoughts.
Personally, from like a game design perspective, but that has nothing to do with her strength. I think she's going to be a relatively strong character that decent amount of versatility. Pretty easy to play as well, which is obviously always an upside.
Easy to play is a nice benefit, but yeah, like really, it's like, okay, is she worth your pull? If you like burning teams, or like you want to use her in burning teams, then yeah, that would be probably a fun pull, I guess you could say, for like a good sub DPS. But yeah, please like and subscribe. It really would help me out quite a bit, considering that, yeah, we are just coming back from you know, the old Genshi's retirement hiatus that was like a whole year long. But yeah, I'm also going to be doing reaction videos to anime reaction videos, and also anime music reaction videos. Or if this video does well, I might actually just keep doing these kind of things, or like reactions to other Genshin Impact content creators, stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see, because at the end of the day, like, this channel needs to be worth my time almost, I would say, and also like worth my creativity. So I can't just sit here only reacting. I have to do something worthwhile with my time. But yeah, thanks so much. It's been me, Hokioku. I'll catch you in the next one. Farewell.
Still living